There is something happening in a lot of households right now that most parents haven't found the words for yet. It's not the content the AI is producing. It's not the time spent on it. It's something quieter than that. Something in the way a child looks when they're talking to it, relaxed, almost soft, and the way they look when they have to talk to a person instead. If you've noticed that shift and didn't know what to call it, this video is built for exactly that moment. Because the question underneath the discomfort isn't really about AI. It's about what children are learning, about conversation, about connection, about what other people are for, when their most available practice partner never gets tired, never misunderstands them, and never needs anything back. That's what this video is actually about. And by the end of it, you'll have a framework for understanding what's at stake and one specific thing worth watching for in your own child. Most of the conversation about AI and children right now is focused on the obvious risks. Misinformation, academic dishonesty, content that's inappropriate. Those concerns are real, but they're also, in a way, the easier part of this conversation because they're about what the AI says. What almost no one is talking about is something different. Not what the AI says, what the AI does, what kind of relational environment it creates every time a child enters it. Here's the distinction that matters. There's AI as a tool, a calculator for language, a research assistant, something a child uses to get something done and then puts down. And then there's AI as a social environment, something a child talks to, returns to, confides in, uses to process their day or their feelings or the thing that happened at school. The boundary between those two categories is not as clear as most parents assume, because the same product that helps with an essay at 4 p.m. is often the same product a child is still talking to at 10 p.m. And somewhere in that transition, from tool to companion, something changes about what the child is practicing. Real relationships require something specific. They require the experience of being misunderstood and working through it. They require the experience of needing something from someone who cannot always give it. They require the slow, sometimes uncomfortable process of learning to read another person whose inner life is not immediately legible. That process, difficult, sometimes frustrating, often ambiguous, is not a design flaw in human relationships. It is the design. It is how children learn to be with other people. And it is the one thing an AI companion, by its fundamental nature, cannot provide. So let's look at what actually happens in a child's developing brain when that practice shifts from human to machine. You already know that children's brains are not finished. The prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for reading social cues, managing uncertainty, tolerating discomfort in relationships, is still under active construction through the mid-20s. What that means practically is this. The social experiences children have during development are not just experiences. They are training. Every time a child navigates a real conversation, one that requires them to wait, to adjust, to repair a misunderstanding, to tolerate a few seconds of awkward silence, they are building something. Developmental research is consistent on this. Social competence is not innate. It is practiced. It is built through friction. The attachment literature goes further. What children learn from relationships that require something of them, that pushback, that don't always give them what they want immediately, that require repair, is that closeness is survivable even when it's hard. That is not a small thing to learn. That is, in fact, the foundational skill of every close relationship a child will have for the rest of their life. Now consider what AI conversation practice offers instead. A response, always, immediate, always, calibrated to what the child said, without fail. No misreading, no distraction, no moment where the other party is tired or preoccupied or just not in the right place to respond. No silence that needs to be tolerated, no repair, because nothing breaks. Here is what the developmental concern actually is, stated plainly. A child who practices connection primarily in an environment that is always available, always responsive, and always affirming, is not just missing the difficult parts of relationship. They are calibrating, they are developing an implicit set of expectations about what conversation feels like, what it requires, what it gives back. And when real relationships, with their delays, their misreadings, their moments of not quite enough, fail to match that calibration, the friction doesn't just feel uncomfortable. It starts to feel like evidence that something is wrong with the friendship, with the other person, possibly with them. This is not what it looks like from the outside. From the outside, it looks like a child who is good at technology and a little introverted. From inside the developing brain, something quieter is happening. Which brings us to the question most parents are actually asking. What does this look like in real time? This is not a diagnostic. What follows is not a checklist that tells you whether your child has a problem. It is a set of observational anchors. Specific things worth noticing, because they are the places where the calibration shift becomes visible, if it's happening. The first signal is a low tolerance for conversational ambiguity. This is the child who gets disproportionately frustrated when a text isn't answered immediately, who reads a delayed response as rejection rather than circumstance, who struggles to stay in a conversation that doesn't give clear, consistent signals of engagement. These are not new behaviors in children, but they are intensifying in a specific population, children with high AI chat use, in ways that researchers studying adolescent social anxiety are beginning to document. The second signal is what you might call preference for legible relationships. This is the child who gravitates toward interactions where the rules are clear. Online spaces with defined social scripts, AI tools, structured games with predictable feedback, and increasingly avoids the messier, less predictable terrain of in-person peer interaction. Not because they are antisocial, because legibility has started to feel like safety. And the third signal, and this is the one worth sitting with, is a subtle shift in how the child talks about people. A flattening of nuance, a tendency to categorize rather than wonder. The child who used to say, "I don't know why she did that," and stay with the uncertainty, who used to be curious about other people's inner lives, begins instead to reach for simple explanations, quick verdicts, clean resolutions, because they have been practicing in an environment where the other party is always interpretable, where there is no gap between intention and communication, where no one is ever really mysterious. And here is the thing that all three of those signals point toward. The thing that sits underneath this entire conversation. Difficulty is not a design flaw in human relationships. It is the design. The child who learns through 10,000 small interactions that the right response always comes, that they will always be understood, that closeness never requires repair. That child is not learning to love people. They are learning a version of connection that people cannot give. And when they eventually encounter the real thing, imperfect, delayed, sometimes painful, occasionally silent, they will be underprepared in a way that will feel, to them, like they are broken. They are not broken. They were just never given the chance to practice on something real. For parents who want to think through this more completely, not just the AI piece, but the full picture of how to raise a child whose identity and relational life isn't built around a screen, there is a guide in the description called Raising a Digital Native with a Soul. It covers ages 5 through 18, addresses AI as part of the broader question of digital identity, and was written for exactly the parent who is watching this video, the one who is thinking carefully before something becomes a crisis rather than after. It's there when you're ready for it. Now, before we talk about what actually helps, there's an objection worth addressing directly, because a significant number of parents watching this are thinking, my child uses AI for homework, not for friendship. They're not having emotional conversations with a chatbot. This is about tools, not companions. That objection is understandable. And it is worth examining carefully, because the social calibration risk doesn't require the child to believe they are in a friendship with an AI. It doesn't require emotional disclosure or late-night conversations. It operates in smaller increments than that. It operates in the accumulated expectation, built through hundreds of low-stakes interactions, that when you send a message, you receive a response. That when you ask a question, it is answered. That the conversational environment is, at its core, organized around your needs. What the research on adolescent social development tells us is that children build their relational templates not from dramatic experiences, but from accumulated ordinary ones. The ordinary experience of AI interaction, responsive, immediate, calibrated, is not neutral just because it is mundane. It is training the same way everything repeated enough times is training. So the one thing, not a ban, not a protocol, one reorientation. For every question a child asks in AI, there is occasionally a version of that question that could go to a person instead. Not always, not as a rule, but as a practice, deliberate and small. The child who gets used to receiving back something imperfect, delayed, occasionally distracted, who learns to stay in the conversation anyway, is building something. The child who experiences the small friction of a real response A parent who says, "Give me a second," and then actually answers, is getting practice on the thing that matters. Not because AI is dangerous, because people are irreplaceable. And the skill of being with people, of tolerating the gap between what you needed and what they could give, of staying anyway, that skill has to be practiced somewhere. Make some of that practice happen in real time, with real people, in real moments that don't resolve cleanly. That is, in the end, the whole intervention. One thing, not everything. If this opens something you want to take further, the bigger picture of who your child is becoming in a world built around screens, the guide in the description and the pinned comment goes one layer deeper across every age. It's there when the moment is right. When did you first notice your child was more comfortable talking to a screen than to a person? And what did that moment look like? What you came in with was a vague discomfort. A noticing without a name, something about the way your child looks at a screen versus the way they look at a room full of people. And the fact that you had no language for why that difference bothered you as much as it did. What you're leaving with is the beginning of a framework, not an alarm. Not a verdict on your child or on your choices. A way of seeing something that was already happening, clearly enough to know what you're watching for. The research on this is still forming. AI is moving faster than the studies can follow it, and anyone who tells you the full picture is already known is overstating it. What is known from decades of developmental and attachment research that predates AI entirely is this. Children learn to be with people by being with people, by surviving the small failures of connection, by discovering that closeness doesn't require perfection, that the gap between what you needed and what someone could give can be bridged, repaired, tolerated, and eventually transformed into something real. I cannot teach that, not because it isn't sophisticated, because it is too consistent, because it never asks your child to wait, because it never makes them wonder, because it never needs anything back. And the moment a child stops practicing on something that needs something back, the moment frictionless becomes the baseline expectation, real human love starts to feel like it's broken. It isn't broken. It's just asking for something the AI never did. That's the synthesis. You already knew something was off. Now you know what it's called. That is not a small thing. That is where everything else starts.